Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. New Zealand is now enjoying stable centre-right government, and Mr. Speaker, that's something we haven't had since the start of MMP. And you can put that down to the success of the National Party and of the success of the ACT Party. ACT has delivered, Mr. Speaker, on its promise. ACT has kept its word. New Zealand has centre-right government because of ACT. For that, I would like to thank all ACT members, ACT supporters and ACT voters, because they made centre-right government possible in New Zealand. I would like to thank Prime Minister John Key, Finance Minister Bill English and National Ministers for their leadership in government through challenging times. We have worked closely together. We have built up a deep and mutual respect and trust. I would like to thank too the Maori Party. We have developed a deep respect for the Maori Party over many years. We have our differences, of course, but we talk about our differences openly and with respect for one another. ACT promised stable centre-right government, and ACT has delivered. But we made solemn policy promises too. Promises made, promises kept. Proof positive that ACT is making a difference. No doubt the highlight of the past year was 3 strikes. ACT campaigned hard at the last election for tougher sentencing with our 3 strikes policy, a policy now to be passed into law. The Sentencing and Parole Reform Bill sends a message loud and clear that New Zealanders will no longer tolerate repeat violent offending. And what do the critics say? What does the left say? What does the Labour Party say? They say it's too harsh. Too harsh? What about the victims? 1 strike, Mr. Speaker, and they're dead. Their families sentenced to a life of pain, of fear, of anguish, and of grief. And here's the message for violent offenders. It's easy to avoid 3 strikes. It's simple. Just stop killing and maiming innocent New Zealanders. And that's the message, Mr. Speaker, that the government has sent. 3 strikes and you're in. A promise made, a promise kept. I have to say, though, Mr. Speaker, it's not all love and roses. We've had our differences with National, and we have a sharp difference over the emissions trading scheme. ACT has always maintained it made no sense to stay committed to Helen Clark's all gases, all sectors trading regime. The failure at Copenhagen makes the commitment all the more silly. ClimateGate is now the greatest scandal in the history of science. It turns out that the prestigious agencies involved in leading climate change science were breaking official information laws, arbitrarily adjusting raw data, hiding the reasons for those adjustments, then somehow contriving to lose the original unadjusted data so that it could not be independently checked, thereby making claims that were not remotely justified by the state of the science and, Mr. Speaker, in some cases, simply making it up. The so-called scientific agencies responsible for climate science have ruthlessly suppressed competing theories and contrary data by controlling and manipulating the peer review process. Government-sponsored climate science has proved to have more in common with the Spanish Inquisition than Popperian science. ClimateGate, GlacierGate, AfricaGate have left the once vaunted IPCC now totally discredited and in ruins. I have always been a sceptic. When I started studying environmental science in 1975, many of the same so-called scientists were trying to scare the pants off us all with the coming of a new ice age. That's because the world had been cooling for 30 years. It then warmed, apparently, for 23 years, so the same scientists turned global cooling into global warming. When the warming stopped in 1998 and the Earth started to cool, the scare switched to climate change. That way, the alarmists could never be wrong. They were right, whatever the temperature. Our own NIWA, sadly, is caught up in the scandal and its scientific credibility shredded. NIWA's raw data for their official temperature graph shows no warming. The raw data shows no warming. But NIWA shifted the bulk of the temperature record pre-1950 downwards, and the bulk of the data pre-1950 downwards, and the bulk of the data post-1950 upwards to produce a sharply rising trend. Their warming trend is not a consequence of measurement, but of manufactured adjustment. Well, there may well be good reason for the adjustment. So before Christmas, with others, I asked NIWA to disclose the adjustments and their reasons. This they said they would do. But they've just told the Climate Science Coalition, after having abused them up and down Dale, that NIWA doesn't have the record of the adjustments. NIWA's entire argument for warming was a result of adjustments to data which now can't be justified or independently checked or verified. It's shonky, Mr. Speaker. The entire thing is. But on the basis of shonky science, our government is whacking Fonterra with a $100 million a year bill, taxing the average dairy farm $10,000 a year extra, and hiking fuel and power costs to every business and householder in the country. Even if the science was perfect, you wouldn't have an emissions trading scheme. But the science is now not just not settled, it's descended into a farce. The total cost to New Zealand is over $1 billion a year, $1 billion we don't have, $1 billion we can't afford, $1 billion for nothing. It's madness. Prime Minister John Key is on record endorsing New Zealand being a, quote, fast follower on climate change, not a leader on it. So let's put the ETS on hold until the rest of the world catches up. I don't think any other country is going to be burdened like New Zealand. So, bad news on the ETS, back to the good news. Education is central to ACT. That's why we support national standards. They will help identify those falling through the many gaping cracks in our education system. Because education is so important, we have reached agreement with National to introduce the Aspire scholarships. 600 students will now be able to have radically improved educational opportunities and life chances. That's just the start. I'm looking forward to the Inter-Party Working Group's report. ACT has put respect for property rights, market competition, individual freedom and personal responsibility into the heart of government, with the Cabinet agreeing to the government statement on regulation, another promise kept. This year a select committee will work on ACT's taxpayer rights bill to cap government spending and put it under taxpayer control. It will rein in government spending, another promise kept. We have our regulatory responsibility bill, which we want to see passed into law, Mr. Speaker, to set fire to the red tape that is clogging up our great country. The no-nonsense report of the 2025 Task Force outlined a path to boost New Zealand's economic performance and lift the opportunity of New Zealanders. For 9 years, we've been told that we should just accept the crumbs off the Aussies' table. Well, we want better than that, Mr. Speaker. New Zealand is a nation of winners, not losers. We're not going into the World Cup looking for coming second. We're going in